And brother, in the early 1940s, it was hopeless. Already, 2,500 years had gone since all these prophecies, and everybody said, it ain't never going to happen. All the Bible teachers would say that it's impossible. It's obviously some kind of spiritual thing. God, there's no way they could ever come back through the land. But God said, I brought you up out of your graves. And when you get done with this, when I get done with this, all of you will stand and say, this is God. Amen. You'll know when you see this happen that the Lord did this. He brought this about. Yeah. This is impossible. God says, that's where I want you to get. I want you to get to that point where you lose all hope and you think it's absolutely impossible until you get to the very brink of absolute extinction. And then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring you to your land. And you know what? Just in the last moments, that's exactly what happened. And right after Hitler failed in his attempt, 1948, just as Ezekiel, just as Jeremiah, just as Isaiah, just as Zechariah, just as all the Old Testament prophets said, and said it would happen in the very last generation, the Israelis would come to their land and they would once again be united as a nation, and the world would have to stop and say, this is impossible. There has to be a God. Yeah. Now, then I told you, obviously, for 38 and 39 to happen, 36 and 37 had to happen. We've already seen it happen, didn't we? Yeah. We've already seen Ezekiel 36 and 37. We just read it to you. Now, let me tell you what's about. See, because here's the thing. Those two chapters are gone. It's all history. Get your history pages out and read it. 38 and 39 is not here. That's future. It could happen at any time. Now, let me tell you why this is important. It's because it says the names of the peoples that would gather. Now, let me just show you this. It talks about this attack against Israel that would be led by Magog. Now, just believe that I'm not lying to you on this. You can do your own homework. It's very obvious. Magog is Russia. Persia, and if you lived, I actually met a man last week that was a missionary to Persia. I guess he looks like he's in his 90s. And he was a missionary when it was called Persia. Does anybody know what Persia is? Iran, yeah. It was called Persia until 1935. And in 1935, it changed its name to the Republic of Iran. Of course, I think it's kind of interesting that even though this is 2,600 years written ago, right now the former Soviet Union is both, the southern states are both military powerhouses, and they're all Muslims. Now, is that a coincidence, or maybe God knows what he's talking about? He goes on to say that Meshech, which is modern Turkey, would also turn on Israel in the same surprise attack. And that's kind of odd because just 9 years ago, Turkey elected a pro-Islamic party to govern their country. The reason why that's important is because Islam absolutely detests Israel. Added to that list of invading armies in this attack is Kush, which is Sudan, and Put, which is modern Libya. Now, I think that's interesting because 3 years ago, the president of Russia made history. What happened is he went to Libya. It's the first Russian president ever to visit Libya. Now, remember what the scripture said, Ezekiel 38 and 39, that Russia would join forces with all these nations. One of them would be Libya. Interesting enough, when he went there, he signed an agreement of $2.5 billion in arms sales to a nation that has openly opposed itself to Israel. Now, do you think that's a coincidence? I don't think that's a coincidence. And I tell you what else is not. It's not a coincidence that this year, Libya is making front pages of the papers. Now, let me just share something with you, because most Bible prophecy students believe that Ezekiel 38 and 39 is going to take place either just prior to or just shortly after the rapture of the church. So technically speaking, this war could happen at any time. I mean, when you watch what's happening right now in Russia and Iran and Libya, everything is pushing that direction. Everyone knows Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is doing everything he can to wipe Israel off the face of the planet. And they're getting their supplies from Russia. Now, I want you to think about this. This current conflict that has been in the news for the past 3 or so months, this is wonderful. Because what it's doing, it's proven beyond doubt there's some movement and changes in the Middle East that is setting up for one ultimate cause. And it has to do with what is called, I'm going to call the spirit of the Amalekites. Let me just stop for just a second. It's only 8:25. Is everybody still with me?
Yes.
Okay. This is going to be very important. And I want you all to listen. This is going to be very important. I know it's long, but this is better than what's on TV, I hope. Amen. And so here you see Jacob and Esau at the dinner. And Jacob is cooking a nice soup, and Esau says, you know what, who cares I'm the firstborn, man? I don't care. I tell you what, I'll give you my birthright if you give me this. The Bible calls him a fornicator, despises his birthright, etc., etc. He's a wicked man, nevertheless. But we read about this problem from the very beginning of these two guys. They're twins. And they represent the people of Israel and the people of Esau. Now, Amalek was Esau's grandson. We read that in Genesis 36. The Amalekites were obviously the descendants of Amalek. Okay, so you have Esau having children, and their children, his grandson was Amalek. Amalek was the descendants called the Amalekites. Okay, so just remember that. When we read, many, many years later, when Moses is coming out of Egypt and God is bringing them into the promised land, the very first war they get into when they cross the Red Sea, of all people, is guess who? The Amalekites. Now, you all remember the story when Aaron and her held up the arms of Moses and all that. That's all in their battle with the Amalekites. Now, in Deuteronomy 25, God told us about a very interesting happening that happened about showing what kind of people these Amalekites were. What they actually did is they got around the back of the army and they killed all the feeble people of the Jews. In other words, they snuck around the back, and instead of fighting like men, face to face, they ran around, and they all, obviously the Jews have always protected their young and their elderly and respected them and would lay their lives down for them. So they got around and they started attacking them from the behind, and they killed all the feeble people, which represents elderly people and children and women and everything else. Well, of course, this absolutely put them into a very bad place. I mean, can you imagine what that would be like as men to have this happen to you? But this just sealed something with the Lord. Matter of fact, it says in Exodus 17, verse 16, the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Okay? Now we'll remember that. This is very important. Here's the thing, because this war has been going on ever since now. That's why right now we're paying up to $4 a gallon because of the spirit of the Amalekites. That's really what it boils down. That's why you got to take your shoes off when you get on the airplane. Okay? That whole thing. Now, this fight has never stopped. To this very day, the Arabs detest Israel. They're endless enemies of Israel, just as the scripture said. Now, why this is interesting, though, is this is all played out in the book of Esther.